what is the ideology of Roma? And I wanted to ask specifically of how that factors into the gradual process of schism of the Eastern Church from Rome in the say the second half of the first millennium and then early in the second millennium.
So we have these various gods and goddesses in the ancient world, which I argue in my book just sort of they just get reincarnated later. And Roma is the goddess of Rome, the eternal personification of eternal Rome. And this is the main ideology that St. Augustine refutes in The City of God Against the Pagans, part 1. The first part, all about paganism. And it's the idea that this nation is eternal, and this nation shall not pass from off the earth. And it's incarnated in particular with Roma. And what it is it's a demonic deception of the true kingdom, which is the kingdom of heaven, which is truly eternal. Of his kingdom there shall be no end. But it is an exaltation of the earthly city against the heavenly, by claiming for the earthly city, it's the Tower of Babel. Let us make a name for ourselves, they say. So it's exalting one's own name to be eternal without God. It's man creating himself to become God without God. So how does this play into the history of the first millennium and whatnot? Well, I already mentioned the Pontifex Maximus ideology. This ideology is, what happens is, we might say it's kind of easy for the Western Christians to be divorced of this Roma ideology because Rome fell. Because Rome fell, it's harder for them to claim that, this is this glorious eternal city because it just got destroyed by the barbarians. Whereas in Constantinople, with all of its magnificent technology of the time, you had the Greek fire, you had the various walls of Theodosius, where people were fleeing to Constantinople for refuge. Whereas Rome, the city of Rome in Italy, was this backwater, overthrown by the barbarians. Constantinople is this great city. So it's easy for this idea of Roma to continue in Constantinople, where there's this eternal city and there's sort of this melding of the fortunes of the church with the fortunes of the Roman Empire. One of the important things to remember is that the term Byzantine Empire is a later term that 1400 people in the 1500s decided to impose on the East. The Eastern Roman Empire always called themselves Romans.
Right.
And there was a Roman emperor on the throne all the way till the fall of Constantinople in 1453. But because of this, there is not this divorcing of the Roma ideology of eternal Rome, eternal earthly city, with the heavenly city of the Christendom. There's really not any book like City of God in the East, written in Greek. It doesn't exist. And so there is this sort of tendency of the Roman emperor in Constantinople to acclaim himself as this representative of Roma, eternal Rome, and to act like he is the high priest, just as the Roman emperors did before. There's sort of an apotheosis of the emperors who are canonized in a certain sense, and some of them even are canonized. And this is what creates this big tension, or this is one huge factor of the tension between East and West, because in the West, there was no emperor for a very long time until they restored the Roman emperor in the year 800. And so you just had the church power of the Pope, who claimed for himself certain prerogatives that the emperor stated was only given to him. And this is why the Greeks, when the Roman Catholics, when the Western Latins begin to baptize these various barbarian nations and incorporate them into Christendom, this is what offends the Greeks so much, because if they're in this Roma mentality, for them, conversion was part and parcel with expanding the Roman Empire. So the Emperor Justinian reconquers the Western Empire, and that's part of the conversion process for him. So like converting is not just baptism, but it's also you have to become a Roman citizen. And that's part of Roma as well. So we have this vision informed by City of God against the pagans by St. Augustine in the West, but we have this old pagan idea of Roma, which continues to be chastened by this Pope in the West who claims to be the successor of St. Peter. And this is what is sort of the underlying, the reading between the lines of these different councils that say, oh, well, old Rome can still have prerogatives, but it's only because it's the imperial city. But if ecclesiastical prerogatives are based on the imperial prerogatives, that's Roma right there. It's that church, that Christ founded the church in terms of the Roman Empire. Christ used the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire was subordinated to the authority of the apostles. And so the whole, such a big portion of this is this Roma ideology, and it becomes reincarnated in various places, which also have the most anti-Catholic biases.
Like Moscow is the third Rome, that kind of
Moscow
thing.
is the main other one, the third Rome. But it also there's a Bulgarian Roma, there's a Siberian, Bulgakov. I'm forgetting the Slavic nation, but there's other manifestations of it. Whereas other powers that didn't really have that, do not have the same thing. But as I say in the very beginning, it's the building of the Triumph Arch is this Tower of Babel manifestation, because this same ideology gets reincarnated once again in the Anglican regime in Whig history. It's the sort of the same sort of Roma ideology, and then we have Manifest Destiny. It's the same sort of ideology of this eternal empire, this eternal nation that will go on forever and never die.
Right.
But that can only be
Lincoln
stated. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it does seem like, not that this has never happened in the Catholic Church at different periods to some extent, but it does seem like the Eastern Orthodox churches, in part because of their regionalism as well, are particularly susceptible to really getting identified with the state. I mean, obviously we see that in the case of the Russian Orthodox Church, certainly in the past century and definitely today as well. But, even the fact that like in the Orthodox Church, Constantine is a saint and has the title equal to the apostles. I was never comfortable with that. Yes, Constantine was a great providential figure, many great qualities. He was baptized on his, at the end of his life, so it's probably in heaven. But, he also, murdered a lot of his family members. And this is after, legalizing Christianity and all of the great stuff that he did. And so to sort of, and they do this with some of the other, Eastern emperors as well, if I remember correctly. So, there's just some things that are like, wait, I don't know. That seems like an over identification of the church with the state there. And because this guy did good things for the church, that means he was a saint. Right.
Yes. Constantine, Justinian, Theodora, his wife, is also, put in mosaics with halos. I was thinking of Serbia. Serbia was the nation was of the other Roman ideology. But what's interesting is that most of the Roman emperors in the East are not canonized, and yet they are still venerated like a Pontifex Maximus. And there's still actually rituals. There's old rituals of the Pontifex Maximus that were holdovers from these pagan rituals, which are still being performed into the 900s by Roman emperors. So there is this tension, whereas the Western Roman emperor and the other kingdoms they're also taking some of their pagan past of their monarchy, but they're also very much modeling this after Old Testament monarchy, whereas the prophet Samuel anoints the king. So the church anoints the king or the emperor and sanctions his rule. So the pope or the bishop is ultimately higher than the king,
Right.
whereas in Constantinople, Justinian's bishops were very much his own bureaucrats. The bishop of Constantinople was, taken out and put back in and moved around at will, as this government bureaucrat. And to a degree, there needs to be a tension between the temporal power. The temporal power does have some say in bishops and that sort of thing as well, but it is this more mutual submission, if you will. If we go back to mutual submission, as a mutual submission there. So, but it was when I was started to look at some of these cultural aspects about the East-West schism, I was really blown away looking at some of these things and how much it really seemed to illuminate really what was going on. And I'd never even realized this until I started to look at it from taking like a pagan Roman, Greco-Roman civilization view of these different things, looking at the Constantine, Emperor Constantine, right? He creates a triumph arch like many of his predecessors did. Emperor Justinian, his church Hagia Sophia becomes his own triumph arch. It's architectural thing, which was actually also a reaction to, it was a political event as well for him, because he was reacting to the Nika riots and his massacring of these civilians and whatnot. So it's this really interesting interplay, which helps to inform this East-West tension, which continues to boil.